Welcome back everybody, my name is Sucker, and today's video is a continuation of my NBA season preview series for the upcoming 2019-20 NBA season, and this one covers the Oklahoma City Thunder. Coming into this past off-season, Oklahoma City was coming off of what was largely a very promising regular season. It seemed like Russell Westbrook had decided to take a little bit of a step back offensively and allow Paul George to really be the primary offensive player on this team the majority of the time, and allowed him, Paul George, to become a legit MVP candidate. And not only that, but the Thunder were one of the best defensive teams in the league and went into the playoffs with the hope, once again, that being one of the best defensive teams in the league and having two legitimate stars and superstars would be enough to make them a dangerous playoff team. But then it all fell apart in the playoffs again, and they lost in the first round again. And it looked like they were ready and set to run it back again with Russ and PG-13. And then things changed pretty much overnight. And with Russell Westbrook and Paul George now playing elsewhere, this has created one of the most bizarre rosters in recent NBA memory, for me at least. Now, having said that, let's go ahead and review the offseason for the Oklahoma City Thunder. The first big addition, in my opinion, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who they received in the Paul George trade. And this is a player that was a lot better as a rookie, I feel like, than a lot of people thought that he would be. He was seen as a bigger guard, someone that could attack the rim, struggled as a shooter, had a little bit of scoring chops, at least in the mid-range, but was just so solid as a rookie. And it was really surprising, especially given that he's playing for Doc Rivers, who historically has not really wanted to play rookies a ton. And he was just such a good piece for them. He wasn't necessarily the most efficient player all the time if you look at his season-long stats, but he was just such a good two-way player, someone that was steady, someone that could create, could play multiple positions either on or off the ball. The one or the two didn't matter, and really fit what the Clippers wanted to do so well last season. And as a young player to come in and exceed expectations that much was really impressive for him. And I think that's a player that the Thunder should certainly be very excited about moving forward. Next up now in terms of additions is another player that they got in the Paul George trade, and that is Danilo Gallinari. Now, I'm going to talk about him a little bit later in terms of the possibilities for him this coming season in terms of a trade, but just as a player, he's going to be good for the Thunder, whichever team he ends up on during this upcoming season. He averaged over 20 a game last year, was finally healthy, and that's really been the case for him throughout his entire career. When he's healthy and when he's not dealing with some kind of injury issue, he's a really effective scorer and a really effective player that provides versatility at either the 3 or the 4 spot, can play on the ball, can play off the ball. Never a great defender just because he doesn't have the kind of athleticism and quickness, but positionally he is at least solid. And like I said, just as a bigger scorer is really nice to have on this team. And again, not necessarily expecting him to be on this team long term, but in terms of an addition and potential value piece later on, I do like the addition of Gallinari for this Thunder team. And then last up in terms of additions is a player that they flipped in addition to getting picks in return for Russell Westbrook, and that is Chris Paul. And initially, like if you're looking at this team to potentially push for like 40 to 45 wins, it's a good thing that Chris Paul is on this team, despite the fact that he very clearly lost a step last year compared to how he was in Houston prior to. He is still a good player, still a good playmaker, still someone that plays extremely hard, can lift up other players around him, even if he does kind of hijack the offense a little bit at times, and is just so used to controlling everything offensively that he doesn't kind of allow everybody else to breathe. And that could be a little bit of an issue for this team. And in my notes, it basically just says, is this going to help Shai Gilgeous-Alexander having Chris Paul on this team, or is it going to hurt him and hurt his development? And I would expect that if it does turn out to be something that's hurting him, then they would be really aggressive in trying to dump Chris Paul to another team and get some value out of him. But it really could go either way. Like, he could be a really good mentor for Gilgeous-Alexander, show him the ropes, and this could be a huge development year for him. Playing alongside Chris Paul could be hugely beneficial, but if Paul doesn't want to give up the reins and doesn't want to be that mentor guy, we've never really seen him in that position, so we don't really know if that's something that he would be interested in and would be all that invested in. It's really kind of up in the air. So the addition of Chris Paul really doesn't have that much to do with his impact on the floor for this team, but more so how his presence impacts Gilgeous-Alexander and then potentially as a trade piece down the road as well. And then in terms of subtractions, this is pretty obvious. Like, you can talk about some other pieces. Jeremy Grant would be a big piece to talk about as well that they sent to the Nuggets, and was kind of the first sign that they weren't really planning on trying to be a good team this year and try and run it back. Because if they had kept Jeremy Grant, maybe it was a sign that they were going to do some other things other than just, I don't want to say tank, but not try and be good. But shipping him away to Denver for a pick kind of showed that they are moving forward and they're trying to do something different rather than just go for 40 wins this year. And then the other two subtractions are obvious. Like, you lose Russ, you lose Paul George. It's hugely impactful compared to their team for last year. Obviously, the Paul George trade was insane in terms of what they got in return. They got some picks back for Russ, but there's really no point in talking about the subtractions any more than that because it's all very obvious stuff. Moving on now to the depth chart, and this is interesting and it's kind of all over the place really, Personally, if you want to kind of finagle a starting five together, I guess you could go CP3, SGA, Gallinari, Diallo, and then Adams with guys like Schroeder and Ferguson and Bazley and Nader and Muscala and Noel coming off the bench. But it's really just all over the place, right? Like Gilgeous-Alexander could very easily come off the bench and you have someone like Ferguson starting. Diallo is certainly not set in stone at the 4 spot. All the different wings could kind of be swapped back and forth. Maybe CP3 doesn't play as much for this team. Maybe he gets traded. Like there's just so much fluidity in terms of roster construction, maybe not so much in terms of versatility up and down the roster. But there are some things to like defensively, they should still be good. Gilgeous-Alexander will be a good defender. Having Adams in the middle, Diallo as a good versatile front court player defensively. Shooting and floor spacing could be an issue, as it has been basically forever for this Thunder team. They don't really invest in shooters in the draft. They more so invest, in like athletes and crazy wing defenders and things like that, like Diallo. They haven't really invested in shooters more recently, so that certainly could be an issue for this team. And like I said, I mean, I would pencil in Gallinari as the long-term 3 for this team, but outside of that, like the 3 and the 4 spots are pretty up in the air. We don't really know what Bazley's going to be as a rookie. Muscala is going to be a floor spacer, probably not a starting option for them. You could even move Gallinari to the 4, and then you could put SGA, Schroeder, and CP3 all on the floor at the same time, go with 3 guards and Gallo and Adams. There's so many different options here. You could, I guess, technically put Noel and Adams on the floor at the same time. There's just so many things because you don't really know where this team is going this season. You don't know what they're going to prioritize. You don't know what they're going to really be focusing on, and it makes it difficult to kind of pinpoint exactly how their depth chart is going to look. I attempted to here, but there's so many different variations of this. Moving on now to some players to watch, and the first one, it has to start with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for me. And I've already talked a little bit earlier about the potential impact or negative impact potentially of Chris Paul on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander this upcoming season. But overall, in terms of long-term, he's definitely the best long-term piece that they have on this team. And I'm hoping that for their sake and just for the sake of the NBA and for the sake of his career, I'm hoping that last year wasn't just kind of a flash in the pan for Gilgeous-Alexander, and he can build on that even on a team that isn't going to be as good this upcoming season for the Thunder. And hopefully they can turn all these picks into something around him, because I was just so impressed with him as a rookie, and I'd like to see him continue that kind of success. Like I said, there's a possibility for Chris Paul to be hijacking the offense and causing some issues for him, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if this upcoming season Gilgeous-Alexander takes a step back simply because he's not in as good of a situation and the Chris Paul thing is just so crazy. But definitely keep an eye on Gilgeous-Alexander to potentially solidify himself as a future all-star for this team. I think that's his ceiling. I definitely think that he can get there, and if he continues to show improvement this year in a slightly worse situation than what he was in LA last year, that would continue to give me hope that he's going to be able to reach that ceiling of an all-star. And then the other player to watch for me is Diallo, and he's someone that can slide pretty seamlessly into the now vacated Jeremy Grant role in the front court at the 4 spot. I understand in the past he's played more of like the 2-3, but I think long term in the league he's more of a 4, more of a Jeremy Grant type player, and as long as he can continue to improve as a shooter, he has everything else, and he's one of those guys that Oklahoma City continues to draft as an athletic wing, versatile, can play multiple positions, good defender, outstanding athlete, and he just has to be able to shoot the ball consistently off the ball and then attack closeouts on occasion as well. I would keep an eye on him, hopefully having more responsibility this season after coming in as kind of a relatively unheralded rookie last year. Had some really good moments as a rookie, and again, I would tentatively pencil him in as the starting 4 if they want to go with that same kind of role that they just had with Jeremy Grant. He could even play the 5 in some lineups if you want to, just because he has the length and the size and the athleticism. I would definitely keep an eye on Diallo this upcoming season for the Thunder. Moving on now to expectations, it's no surprise, I don't think this is going to be a playoff team this upcoming season for a variety of reasons, and I'll just go ahead and skip to the prediction part. I've got this team at about 27 to 30 wins and multiple starters probably being traded and obviously not making the playoffs. And the reasoning for this, and I've talked about this in a video before, is just talent-wise, right? Like if every single team in the league kept the players on their roster this season and didn't move them and played as hard as they could and tried to win as many games as possible, and tanking and the lottery odds and all that stuff wasn't a thing, this is probably a 38 to 40 win team roster-wise. Like they have good players, they have guys like Chris Paul, they have Gallinari. What I'm expecting is that maybe they get off to an okay start, but they realize, hey, long-term, it's better for us to lose more games this year, and they start shipping out Gallinari, they start shipping out Chris Paul, because it doesn't make any sense to do anything otherwise, right? Like in terms of just getting value, like Gallinari is an expiring contract. He's a good player that other teams are going to want. At least get value out of him instead of letting him walk. It doesn't make sense to do anything otherwise. Same thing with Chris Paul. He's not a part of your long-term plans. This should be a long-term situation for the Thunder in terms of building their team. Get value out of him in some way, hopefully. And that's really why I think they're going to be down at the 27 to 30 win mark as opposed to anywhere higher. Now, I do think it's going to be a good season for them in terms of, like I said, getting back that value. Hopefully they're young guys developing, and I think it's going to be something where you can at least see promise. Obviously they have all these picks moving forward, but I'm just not seeing the regular season success for them, because more so because it's going to be a choice, right? Like if they chose to, they could probably push to potentially 40 wins. If that's something that they really wanted to do, and maybe that's what they'll do. But in my opinion, at least in terms of a prediction, and maybe this is more so what I'm hoping that they'll do, because I think it's the smarter move. I think that they're going to trade multiple players. I think that they're not going to really push for the playoffs too much, and I've got them between, like I said, 27 and 30 wins. But there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, including any of the other season previews that I've done up to this point, I think we're reaching about like the 8 to 9 to 10 range in terms of how many of them have been put out at this point. Then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Be sure to check out all those season previews so you can be prepared for this upcoming NBA season. But once again, my name is Tucker. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you all next time.